So we have the Manchester 2016 Arithmetic A paper today. I think this paper is a little easier than the previous ones, but let's work through it and see. So the first couple of questions you should be able to work out pretty quickly and accurately. So do you want to start doing those on paper? And I shall just do them on the board so you can see how to set it out. So 983 plus 254. Make sure you copy down the right numbers, because often children make a mistake with that. And should be that. And then 573 times 300. Remember, the easiest way of doing that is to do 573 times 3 and then add 2 zeros to your answer. Just let you calculate that quickly. Maybe a typo in what you wrote, Shri, so just make sure you're getting those numbers completely accurate. So 171,900. 171,900, that number as a whole. And number 3, there are 2 ways of converting this to a decimal. I think possibly the easiest way is to convert it into hundredths and then write that as a decimal. So 7/20 into hundredths, we times by 5. So we get what fraction as the there? Good, some of you have got that answer already. Good, well done. So 35 hundredths, and 35 hundredths is written as 0.35. Now the other way of converting any fraction into a decimal, regardless of how easy the denominator is to go into 100, is if you divide the numerator by the denominator. So can you all try that as well for me? Make sure you put your numbers in the right place. So you're dividing the numerator by the denominator, like that. So just give that division a try quickly. Make sure you're carrying the right amounts. We'll start it on the board. So 20s into 7 go 0 times. And then we put 0.0 because we have a remainder. And if we put a point underneath the bus stop, we have to put one above. So now we carry that 7. 20s into 70 go 3 times. Our remainder is 10. Now what a lot of children will do is carry 1, so they have 10 there. But that's wrong. You need to carry the 10. So 20s into 100 go 5 times. So our answer either way is 0.35. Number 4, just quickly work that out for me. What fraction of a day is 9 hours? Write your fraction in its simplest form. Hopefully you know how many hours in a day. We've got 24 hours in a day. Good, lots of you are giving me the correct answer here. So 9 over 24, and then they both divide by 3, so that simplifies to 3/8. As this question said, write your answer in its simplest form, you would not get the mark if you put 9/24, so don't forget to simplify. Okay, number sequences. Now, you're probably sick of hearing me say this every week, but we should write what the difference is between each of the numbers. So can you calculate that for me, and someone just tell me what the difference is? What's the difference between those numbers?
1.6.
Thank you. In chat is fine, by the way. So 1.6. And then we need to add 1.6 to 4.3. I've already had one answer, but you were being too hasty because you gave me 5.6 and that's wrong. Yes, good. So thank you for all of you that have given me the answer in here. So the answer is 4.3 plus 1.6, which is 5.9. Good. Okay, so number 6 is tricky. Now this doesn't, subtraction of fractions doesn't come up in every 11 plus exam. It's only in certain syllabuses, or syllabi, I should say. So don't worry too much about this one, but what I would like everyone to be able to do is to turn both of these into improper fractions. So can you just tell me what those would be in chat as an improper fraction? Don't change the denominator. Yeah, so we've got the first one is 17 over 4, 17 quarters. And then the second number as a mixed number, yes, is 8/5. So minus 8/5. Now we would need to convert those fractions into fractions that have the same denominator. Now both 4 and 5 go into 20. So what I'm going to do is multiply this first fraction by 5, multiply the second fraction by 4, and then we will have 20 as the denominator for both. So if I times both the numerator and the denominator by 5 for the first one, I'm going to keep going in red, I would get 85 over 20. For the second one, I would get 32 over 20. Then you'll need to subtract. So 85 take away 32 is 53. And the denominators don't change. When you do fraction subtraction, the denominators stay the same. Because if you had 85 20ths in front of you and you took away 32 20ths, the size of the fraction wouldn't change. They would still be 20ths, you'd just have fewer of them. So our answer is 53 20ths. And can you please write that for me as a mixed number? The answers here accepted both as a correct answer. So you could put 53 over 20, or you can put what a couple of you have given me, which is 2 and 13 20ths. Okay, good. Right, the next one, we need to divide by a decimal number. It's not too hard to divide by a decimal number once you know how. So the problem that we have here is that there's a decimal number over here. It's fine to have a decimal over here. So to get rid of the decimal point, I am going to times both numbers by 10, which gives me 648 divided by 6. I'm just going to ask you a quick question before we do that calculation. So if I've times both of these numbers by 10 to do the division, do I need to do anything to my answer, to this, in order to get my final answer? Do I need to make any changes at the end, or can I just go ahead? Getting some mixed answers here. So let's test out whether we would need to change anything. Let's use some numbers that we know, apply the same theory, and see what happens. So if I have, let's say 10 divided by 2, we know the answer is 5. But what happens if I times both of those numbers by 10? I get 100 divided by 20. And what's 100 divided by 20? That's 5 as well. So when I times both numbers by 10, I get the same answer as I had before. So when I do this calculation, I'm going to get the same answer that I would have got when I did the first one, dividing by a decimal. So you don't need to do anything to your answer once you've done that division. Now just quickly, someone asked me whether I mean times by 100. I do not. Oh, sorry, I didn't put the decimal point in there. Maybe that's why you're confused. So I times them both by 10. That gets rid of the decimal point in this, which means I can do the question. And I should have a decimal point in there because they're only times by 10. So you do that calculation, sorry, and then you will get the correct answer. Okay, so I can get some answers through, so just work it out. Okay, good. Okay, I'm just going to put that on the board. So 10.8 is our answer for that one. Okay, good. Right, next one, if you've done that, number 7 now, subtract the difference between 62 and 35 from the product of 13 and 6. I'm going to put them in brackets just to separate the calculations for me. So subtract the difference from the product of those numbers. Product, remember, means multiply. So you're going to find out 62 minus 35. You're going to find out 13 times 6, and then you'll subtract one answer from the other. Good, working quickly today, well done. So 62 minus 35, 27. 13 times 6 is 78. And when you subtract one from the other, you get 51. Well done. Next one. One of the angles in a triangle is 40 degrees. One of the remaining two angles is 3 times larger than the other angle. What is the largest angle in the triangle? First thing we need to remember here is that the angles in a triangle add up to what? What do the angles in a triangle add up to?
180 degrees.
Okay, remember we're using chat today. So 180 degrees is what the angles add up to. Now, because one angle is 3 times larger than the other angle, we are going to use ratio. When something is 3 times as large as something else, we use ratio. If we had the difference between those, it would be a completely different story. So one of the angles in a triangle is 40 degrees. The other two angles, therefore, must add up to 140. So I'm going to label these angles A and B, missing ones. So I'll do A to B. That ratio is 3 to 1. I'm not going to have much room here for this. 3 and 1 add up to 4. But we want these numbers to add up to 140. Now, a few of you are giving me wrong answers, so just make sure you're listening to this carefully. Okay, so they add up to 140, so I put the 140 in there. Now, let's go from 4 to 140. You'll have to divide. Tell me how many times 4 goes into 140. Yep, 35. So if you've got the answer 90, 70, or 20 so far, you're wrong, so make sure you're listening. Okay, so 4 goes into 140 35 times. So we just multiply everything else in the ratio by 35. 1 times 35 is just 35, and then we need 3 times 35, please. Yep, thanks, Annabelle. 3 times 35 is 105. So our angles are 105, 40, and 35. Let's reread the question to make sure that we're answering what they asked. It says, what is the largest angle in the triangle? The largest angle would be 105. Okay. A shop reduces its prices by 20% in a sale. David bought a coat for £40 in the sale. How much would the coat have cost him before the sale? So in a 20% off sale, David paid £40. So if you take 20% off a number, what percentage are you left with? You take 20% off, what percentage are you left with? 80%, good. So he paid 80% of the price, and 80% was equal to £40. We need 100% of the price. That will tell us the original amount. So let's figure out how to get to 100%. First, I would do 10%, because I can go from 80 to 10, and then I'm going to go from 10 to 100% in a second. So how do I get from 80 to 10%? I divide by 8. So I do the same on the other side. I divide by 8, and I get £5. And then, a few of you give me answers, I think. Yeah, is it good? So we've got some correct answers coming through. So then I get from 10% to 100%. If I know 10% of a number is 5, I can just times by 10 to get 100%. £5 times 10 is £50. So the original price of the item must be £50. So in a question like this, you need to ask yourself what percentage of the cost is paid, and then we use that to get this number. Don't be tricked though, because sometimes a question may say he pays 60% of the price. So in that case, you don't want to do 40%, you want to do the 60%. So just make sure you've read it carefully and you've thought it through. Okay, next page, we're halfway through. Oh no, this is where it gets tricky. Actually, I'm going to go onto this page so we have more room. Nigel folds a square piece of paper in half to give a rectangle which has a perimeter of 36 centimeters. What is the area of the original square? It's quite a bit to take in there, so you might want to reread it. So Nigel folds a square piece of paper in half to give a rectangle which has a perimeter of 36 centimeters. What is the area of the original square? I know one of you has just given me an answer. Let's work it through and see if that is correct. So fold a square piece of paper in half, and there's nothing wrong with doing a little doodle on your piece of paper in the exam if it helps you to figure out where you're going with this. So sometimes it's just better to visualize it on a piece of paper. So fold in half to give a rectangle which has a perimeter of 36 centimeters. So this rectangle, let's say, has a perimeter of 36. Now I need to find out what the sides are. If this is made from a square folded in half, and let's call that side A and that side B, what do I know about the ratio of these two sides? Concentrate on the question for me. So if this is a square folded in half, what is the ratio of these two sides? What is the ratio of A to B? It is not 4:1. Remember that this is a square folded in half. That's the key. Yep, some of you have given me the answer. So it's 1:2. Some of you have given me 2:1. But as I asked for A to B, the ratio is 1:2. And the reason for that is that, remember, as it's a square, this side was the same length as this side, but then we halved it. So A must be half of B. We only know that because it was a square to begin with. So the ratio of A to B is 1:2. But the thing is, when we found the perimeter, we would have added A plus A from that side, plus B from this side, plus B from that side to get 36. But in my ratio, I've only got one A and one B. So one A and one B must add up to what? If A plus B equals 36, what does 1A plus 1B equal? Yep, good. 18. So A plus B equals 18. In the ratio, 1 and 2 equal 3, but what I would like is for them to equal 18. So then I've got all the information I need to fill in the ratio, because I've got the full first line and something on the second line. So 3 times 6 is 18. So I times everything by 6. I get 12 and 6 there. So now I have the lengths of the sides. I know B is 12 centimeters and A is 6 centimeters. Now let's go back to the original question and figure out what they were asking here. So we've got the lengths of the sides. The original question was, what is the area of the original square? So I want to know the area of this square here. I figured out that the long side of the rectangle is 12. So all of the sides will be 12 centimeters. So how do I figure out the area of the square? Yeah, good. Just give you another couple of seconds to have a think about that. Let it sink in. Good. So to find the area, we'd just do this side times this side. So 12 times 12, and it's 144. Now, one or two people said 72 as the original answer. I think you just doubled 36. But remember, perimeter was 36, and we wanted to know the area of the whole thing. So you can't just double the perimeter and get the area. Make sure you're reading that question properly so you're getting what they're asking. So yeah, 12 times 12 is 144 centimeters squared. So that's our answer. If that's a bit confusing, what you might want to do, so if you're watching this at home, then you can pause this video and maybe do that question again from scratch and see if you can do it on your own. Or if you need a little while for it to sink in, then I think after this video, after we've done this session, you can go through it at home and then you can let me know if you want to go over it, or you can rewatch this part of the video. Okay, there's another question where I'm going to need some room, I think. So Rachel buys 3 identical bags of sweets and 5 cans of drink. The total cost of these items came to £4.90. Rosie buys just 1 bag of sweets and 3 cans of drink and pays £2.70. What is the cost of a bag of sweets? I'm going to go onto my other page, so you've got some more room. Now, if you are preparing for O-Labs with me, then we've been doing a few questions like this lately, so let's see if you can apply some of your simultaneous equations knowledge. So I'm going to say S for sweets and D for cans of drink. And let's write an equation for each one. So even if you haven't been doing the O-Labs work, let's try and write an equation. So 3 identical bags of sweets and 5 cans of drink. So I'll put 3S and 5D. Total cost of these items came to £4.90, equals £4.90. Rosie buys just 1 bag of sweets, so S, and 3 cans of drink, 3D, and pays £2.70. What is the cost of a bag of sweets? Now we can't subtract these because we'll just be left with the price of 2 bags of sweets and 2 drinks, and that doesn't help us. What we're going to have to do is get the same number of either sweets or drinks. So let's take this. And I want to multiply that by something. So either the sweets are the same or the drinks are the same. So I'm going to multiply it by 3. So I'm going to multiply everything in that row by 3. Let's do 3S plus 9D equals £2.70. Where are my notes? Times 3, £8.10. And then I'm going to rewrite this equation underneath just for practicality. Now I'm going to subtract those one from the other. So I'll do 3S minus 3S. They cancel each other out. They've gone. 9D minus 5D is 4D. Now listen up, if you haven't done the O-Labs material, you might be able to finish up from here. So make sure you're paying attention. 4D equals £3.20. So 4 drinks cost £3.20. How much does 1 drink cost? I'm going to just divide both sides by 4. Yeah, so 1 drink costs 80p. So I'm going to go back and use that equation that I highlighted in green, and I'm going to use this new information to figure out the cost of a bag of sweets. Why don't I give you all a few seconds to try and work that out. So you know, kind of drink costs 80p, and we also have this information. Let's put those together to figure out the cost of a bag of sweets. That's good, starting to get there. Good. So just in case you needed some help, so S plus 3D is £2.70. 3 drinks, therefore, if they're 80p each, 3 drinks cost £2.40. Plus the bag of sweets is £2.70. I take away £2.40 from each side, and therefore S must be 30p. And let's reread the question as per usual to make sure that we've answered everything we're supposed to answer. What is the cost of a bag of sweets? So our answer is 30p. There we go. 30p. And remember to look at the units in the question there. You would not want to write it as this, because then it would be wrong. Okay. Tim has 3 apples. The mean average weight of 3 apples is 90 grams. When Tim eats the largest apple, the mean weight of the remaining 2 apples is just 70 grams. What was the weight of the largest apple? Give you a second to have a think about it. And then maybe once you've figured out the first step, you can tell me in chat. Just the first step. Christian, that is the wrong answer. So have a think about what the first step would be. Okay. I'm going to start telling you unless I get an answer quickly. Okay, so how would we find the mean? When we calculate the mean, we add up all of the numbers together and then we divide by how many numbers we had. So Olivia, we do need to find the weight of the large apple, but we can't do that as the first step, unfortunately. It's not that easy. If anyone is getting 20 grams as the answer, that's wrong. So listen up, okay? So the first step is figuring out the total weight of the 3 apples. So remember I said we would add all their weights and we divide by the number of apples, and that's how we'd get the mean. So we have 3 apples, so we would add them all up, we'd get some answer, divide by 3, and then we'd get 90 grams. So what must the 3 apples have added up to initially at the beginning? Oh, sorry, my screen's not sharing right now. One sec. So we add them all up, we divide by 3, and we get 90. So what did they add up to? Yes, good. Someone's concentrating on what I'm saying. So 270. The apples must have added up to 270 initially. Now Tim eats the largest apple and the mean weight of the remaining 2 apples is just 70 grams. So using the same logic, can you tell me what the total weight of the remaining 2 apples is? Good, Thomas? Yeah. So to find the mean of the remaining 2 apples, we'd add them up, we'd divide by 2, and we'd get 70. So they must have added up to 140 to start off with. So before, when we had 3 apples, they added up to 270. When we only had 2 apples, they added up to 140. So how do we use that to find the weight of the largest apple? I think some of you could have got this more quickly if you'd been concentrating the whole time, because this last part isn't that hard, but I think you've been doing your own thing. Yeah, good, I'm starting to get some answers. So to find the weight of the largest apple, that must be the difference between these 2 numbers. If they added up to 270 before, we took away an apple and they added up to 140, then the largest apple must be the difference between them, which is 130 grams. So be careful, because some of you are doing just 90 take away 70, and it's probably not going to be that easy, I'm afraid. That's fairly straightforward if you just need to do that subtraction. So if it seems too easy, it probably is, and maybe you need to go back and check. Okay, number 14. This has a bit of a red herring in it, so it gives you some information that you don't really need to know. Let's see where that is. But in the sequence of numbers which starts 2, 3, 5, 9, each number is 1 less than 2 times the previous number in the list. What is the number in the list immediately before 257? This is our red herring, because you don't actually need to use those numbers. The most important bit of information is that each number is 1 less than 2 times the previous number. So why don't you try and just draw a little number machine for this question? Just draw a number machine. So a number machine for this. Each number is one less than 2 times the previous number. I'm going to put our mystery number at the beginning. And then we would have to times that by 2 as our first step. And then we would subtract 1. Be careful there, because they say the subtract 1 before they say the 2 times, but actually these steps go in a different order. So we would times by 2, subtract 1, and we would get 257. Now we've set that out, all we need to do is work backwards. So instead of doing -1, we add 1 to this. So we get 258. I like to jot down each answer there underneath so I don't forget. And then, so some of you are forgetting to do the opposites here. And then we would need to do the opposite of timesing by 2, which is divide by 2. So you're going to do 258 divided by 2. I would work it out on paper, guys, because some of you are very close but not quite right. You're like 6 or 7 off, and it's worth just doing it on paper quickly to make sure you are correct. So 129 258 divided by 2. 2's into 2 go once, 2's into 5 go twice, carry the 1, 2's into 18 go 9 times. So 129 is the original number. Lots of people getting 126. I think that's just because you didn't work it out on paper. So don't take the risk. It won't take too long at all to do it on paper. Right. A plant is growing at a steady rate of 0.2 centimeters every day. At midday on January the 19th, the plant was 6 centimeters high. What will the date be when it reaches a height of 11 centimeters? Give you another second just to read over that. And then tell me what our very first calculation is there. First thing I need to work out. I need to know how much the plant has grown. Yes, thank you, Olivia. So I just need to do 11 take away 6 for my first one. The plant has grown by 5 centimeters. Now we need to know how many times 0.2 goes into 5 centimeters. Now we've already done decimal division today, so why don't we use it again? We need to know 5 centimeters divided by 0.2. So times both of those numbers, so you get rid of the decimal point, times them both by 10. Sometimes you do times them by 100 or 1,000, but in these cases, we just need to move the decimal point one place, so it's out of the way. So what would we get? 50 divided by 2 would be the calculation, and 50 divided by 2 is 25. So it takes 25 days for the plant to grow 0.2 centimeters, for the plant to grow 5 centimeters. So 25 days at a rate of 0.2 is how long it takes to grow 5 centimeters taller. So now we need to figure out what is 25 days from January the 19th. I think you should use a timeline for this. Okay, someone's just said, can I explain again? I'll just go over it. So the plant grows from 6 centimeters to 11 centimeters. So it must grow 5 centimeters. We need to know how many lots of 0.2 go into 5 centimeters, because that's how long it takes to grow. So 0.2 every day, how long does it take to be 5 centimeters? So we divide. This, again, is one of those questions where if you're not sure, try it with some easy numbers. So let's say it grows 5 centimeters every day, and we need it to grow 20 centimeters in total. How would we figure out how long it takes? We do 20 divided by 5. So here we did 5 divided by 0.2 to figure out how many days it is, and it's 25 days. Then we need to do 25 days later than January the 19th. Getting some mixed answers here, so let's work it out on a number line. First of all, you need to know how many days are in January. So hang on, just January 19th? Yes. So January the 19th, there are 31 days in January. So what you can do is go to January the 31st. January 19th to 31 is 12 days. January the 31st to February the 1st is 1 day. So we've had 13 days so far, and we needed to do 25 days later. So February the 1st. 25 days later, so we add another 12 days. February the 1st plus 12 days is February the 13th. Good, a few of you have got that. Do use a timeline for that kind of thing, because you don't want to just be 1 day off. It's very easy to miscount there. Yeah, good guys. So February the 13th. Just going to write February with the spelling because a lot of people spell it wrong. February 13th. Okay, next question's probability. Hopefully not too tricky as long as you're careful. This has another red herring in it actually, because it has, it tells you the colors, which aren't that relevant. They're kind of relevant, but don't get bogged down by extra details. So a bag contains colored counters of just 2 colors. There are 20 green counters numbered 1 to 20 and 30 blue counters numbered 1 to 30. What is the probability of picking a counter from the bag which is a multiple of 4? So first of all, can you tell me, you can type it in the chat, tell me the green counters that are multiples of 4. So just tell me what number is showing on them for the green ones. Yeah, you start writing those down. So green counters, we have 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. Don't forget 20. So there are 5 green counters that are multiples of 20. Now I need to know how many blue counters, sorry, not multiples of 20, multiples of 4. How many blue counters are multiples of 4? Yep. So blue, 4, 8. You could just assume that you have that first 5 if you wanted to save some time writing them out. 20, and then we have 24 and 28 as well. So we have 5 green counters and 7 blue counters, which makes a total of 12 counters that are multiples of 4. Now to figure out the probability, I just take that number of counters, the number of times it could happen, over the total number of events. So the total number of counters in there is going to be 30 plus 20, which is 50. And the total number of counters that we want is 12. So it's just going to be 12 over 50, 12 over the total number of counters. And if you simplify that, be careful simplifying because I'm getting some wrong simplified answers here. 12 divided by 50, you divide both by 2, you get 6 over 25. 6 over 25. Okay. Have a look at the next one. Good. Let's give them a few seconds to finish that off. So Lathes Engineering produces 10 boxes of screws every minute. It has to produce 48,000 boxes of screws in 5 days. 10 boxes every minute. If its machines work an equal number, I'm just making up these words. If its machines work an equal amount of time each day, work out the number of hours which will be needed each day to produce the boxes of screws needed. Got it out in the end. So let's go over that again, lots of numbers. So it has to produce 48,000 boxes of screws in 5 days. Same number of boxes every day. So we'll just assume that And then we don't have to worry about the last part of information. So if it produces 48,000 over 5 days, how many does it need to produce? How many boxes do they need to produce every day to make it to 48,000? So you're going to do 48,000 divided by 5. So 5 divided by 4. 48 divided, sorry, 4 divided by 5. I'm getting all jumbled. 4 divided by 5 is 0. 48 divided by 5 is 9. Carry the 3. 30 divided by 5 is 6. 0, 0. So they need to produce 9,600 boxes a day. And they produce 10 boxes every minute. So how many minutes will it take to produce 9,600 boxes? You might want to set out your work as a ratio, might make it easier. Yeah, the division is simple, but it's just a matter of keeping track of what you're doing. So you know that they make 10 boxes every minute. They want to make 9,600 boxes, so it must be times 960. Remember, you divide by 10, you can just knock off a 0. So times by 960. So it takes 960 minutes to produce the right number of boxes per day. But the question says how many hours will be needed each day? So how do you get from 960 minutes into hours? What do we divide by? We'll need to divide by 60. Good, Mufe and Dina. So do 960 divided by 60. Now don't be put off because you're dividing by a double-digit number. You do 960 divided by 60, but if you are put off by dividing by a double-digit number, remember you can actually simplify this because they both end with zeros. So you can knock off the zeros and you can do 96 divided by 6. And remember, you don't need to do anything to your final answer in order to have it. So you don't need to change your final answer in any way. So 6 is into 9, go once, carry the 3. 6 is into 36, go 6 times. So our answer is 16. It takes 16 hours to produce 960 boxes, 9,600 boxes a day. And then you'll do that over 5 days and you'll have 48,000 boxes. So 16 hours. So first we figured out how many boxes are needed per day. And then we figured out how many minutes that took. And then we converted the minutes into hours. Right, let's move on to question number 18. This is a tricky one. Again, this is more of an OLAVs question, I would say, because the OLAVs boys have done lowest common multiple. You can do this without having covered that, but it's going to take a while. So let's have a read. At Frantic Junction, trains arrive at regular intervals on 3 different lines. On the line from A-Town, trains arrive every 15 minutes. On the line from Beeville, they arrive every 12 minutes, and from Seaford, they arrive every 8 minutes. At 10 a.m., a train from each town arrives at Frantic Junction. What is the next time that the 3 will arrive together? So we need to figure out what number 15, 12, and 8 go into. What I think I'll do is I will let you all work it out for a minute. So if you haven't done lowest common multiple, what you'll need to do is write out the multiples of 15. I'm saying 15 because that's the largest number. We need to know what all of those go into. Make sure you're muted, please, guys. So we need a number that all of them go into. There's no point in doing multiples of 8 because you'll have like the first few that 15 definitely can't go into, like so 8, 16, 24. We know 15 doesn't go into those. So start with the largest number. So you can write multiples of 15 and then see which one 12 and 8 go into. Okay, so you might want to pause this at home so you can write out the multiples. If you are doing lowest common multiple, I'll just show you how. Anyone that hasn't done this before can just ignore it. So I'm going to write out the prime factors of each number. And 8. So on the left here, I have the prime factors of each number. And then I'm going to multiply the biggest group of each number together. So the biggest group of 2's that I have is 3 2's, so 2 cubed. The biggest group of 3's that I have is just 1 3 in a column. And the biggest group of 5's that I have is 1 5 in a column. Then if I multiply all of those together, I get 120. So 120 is the smallest number that 15, 12, and 8 will go into. Let me just see if you get, so 15 times 8, by the way, is 120. You can do it that way, but sometimes that doesn't give you the smallest number. It just gives you a number that they go into. But yeah, it's 120. So after 120 minutes, the trains will meet again. 120 minutes is 2 hours. Now reread the question, because 2 hours is not our final answer, and you don't want to miss the mark just because you didn't answer it fully. So at 10 a.m. they depart. What is the next time that trains will arrive together? So it's 2 hours later than 10 a.m., which makes it 12 p.m. Okay, the next one. Irfan has 6 fraction cards as shown below. Write down a possible way in which he can add 3 or more cards to get the answer 1/2. The only way of doing this is if we convert all of those fractions so they have the same denominator. So can you convert them all so they have the denominator 24? So use equivalent fractions and write down what you would have for each one. Give you a few seconds to do it, and then I will start writing them on the board. If you want some help starting this, if you're not sure how to convert them, can you send me a message in chat quickly? Just say help, and then I'll explain it on the board. Okay. So 1/12, we want to convert it into 24ths. So I'll do 1/12 into 24ths. 12 goes into 24 2 times. So I times the numerator by 2 as well. I get 2 24ths. 8 into 24. 8 times 3 is 24. So I times the numerator by 3 as well, and I get 3. So because I've times the numerator and the denominator by the same thing, these fractions stay equal, but I've just written it with a different denominator. So you need to do that for each one. So 1/24 just stays as it is. 1/12 becomes 2 24ths. 1/8 becomes 3 24ths. 1/6, we're timesing by 4, so 4 24ths. And 1/4, we're timesing by 6, 6 24ths. And 1/3, we're timesing by 8, 8 24ths. Now start adding up those numerators to see if you can make a half. Now a half would be equal to 12 24ths. Remember, if the numerator is half the denominator, then it's a half. So 12 24ths makes 1/2. How can you add 3 of these fractions to make 1/2? There are several possibilities. So can you send the answers to me privately and send me one of the possibilities that you've got? Okay, yes, Emily. Now, Emily, you've sent me the fractions in the converted form, which is fine because you need to do that to work it out. However, the answers for this specifically state that you have to give the original fraction as your answer. So can you try and do that for me in chat, everyone? So once you've figured it out, you then need to write the original fraction in its place. I'll connect them on the board. Should have written them more directly underneath to make it easier. Okay. Just getting my answers so I can compare some of those. Okay. 1/8, 1/4, and 1/6. Don't think that will work. 1/8, 1/4 makes 9, and 1/6. No, 1/8, 1/4, and 1/6 will make 13/24. So that doesn't work. Yeah, Tanya, that's another combination. So I'll tell you some of the combinations I have. We have 1/12, 1/6, and 1/4. So 12 is 2, 6 is 4, and 4 is 6. So we have 2, 4, 6. 2, 4, and 6 makes 12. So this is one combination that you can have. You can also have 1/24, 1/8, and 1/3. And then the final option that you can have where you use 4 cards is 1/20th, 1/12th, 1/8, and 1/4. So those are the 3 options that you can have for that question. Right, so number 20. We've got 83 as a prime number. If Nancy reverses the order of the digits, she gets 38, which is not a prime. How many 2-digit primes do give a different prime number when their digits are reversed? So we start off with lowest 2-digit prime number, which is 11. Now we're going to ignore the early prime numbers like 5, because even if you put a 0 in front of it, it doesn't fit the criteria of the question. So let's just ignore that one. So 11, 13, 15, sorry, not 15, 17, got carried away with my odd numbers, and 19. Let's go through those and check which ones work with this question. So 11, if you reverse it, you do get a prime number. However, it's the same prime number that you had before. The question says it has to be a different prime number. So 11 doesn't work. 13, if you reverse it, you get 31. 31 is a prime, so that works. 17, if you reverse it, you get 71. 71 is a prime, and that works. Now 19, 91. So it's not in our times tables, so that helps. However, let's check whether it is a multiple of 3. Can anyone tell me how we check whether a number is a multiple of 3? Who remembers?
Add up the digits and see if they're a multiple of 3.
Yes. So if we add up 9 and 1, we get 10. 10 is not a multiple of 3, so 91 isn't a multiple of 3. So I know it's not a multiple of 3. I've looked at the last digit. If it was a 5 or a 0, it would divide by 5. It doesn't divide by 5. The only one I want to check finally is whether it divides by 7. So just do 91 divided by 7 quickly. It does. So 19 doesn't work for the purposes of this question. So we've only got 13 and 17 so far. Now, I'm not going to bother writing down any numbers in the 20s, because look at what happens when I reverse them. So 23 is a prime number, but if I reverse the digits, I get 32. I get 2 in the units. Now, all numbers ending with 2 are even numbers, and apart from 2 itself, they would not be primes. So I know all of the prime numbers in the 20s will be even numbers when reversed, so they don't count for this question. So I'll save myself some time and not write that down. Now the 30s. Can you type some of the prime numbers from the 30s for me, guys? Remember, with these numbers, we will check whether they are multiples of 3. Yep, so 31 and 37. Any more? Not 33, because that's a multiple of 3 and 11. And 39, 3 and 9 add up to 12. That's a multiple of 3, so 39 doesn't divide by, isn't a prime number either. So we just have 31 and 37. Now reverse those digits and check whether they are still prime numbers. Someone had mentioned that perhaps 31 wouldn't work because we'd already had 13. It's fine to have that because they do both still give a different prime number when reversed. So they count for this. We don't have to ignore it. So 31 and 37 work. I'm going to ignore the numbers in the 40s because they will all end with 4 when reversed, and then they won't be prime numbers. So we can scrap those. Numbers in the 50s. What is wrong with including a number in the 50s? Can you tell me in chat? When it's reversed, so 55 won't work because it's a multiple of 11. But what about 51? Oh, 51 actually is a multiple of 3. But yes, so saying that they start with a 5. So when you reverse them, they'll end with a 5. And all numbers ending with 5 are multiples of 5. So I won't write the numbers in the 50s. All the numbers in the 60s will be even numbers as well when reversed. So I'll ignore those. And that takes us to the 70s. So can I have prime numbers in the 70s, please? What would those numbers be? 71 is one. We checked that earlier when we did 17. 73. Mute, please, guys. And yeah, 79. And I've already checked whether the digits add up to a multiple of 3. They don't. And none of those numbers divide by 7 either. And I know they're not in my 9 times table. So we're good there. So 71, 73, and 79 will all work. 80s will all be even numbers when reversed. We'll ignore those. And so that brings us to the 90s. Now we know 91 won't work because we reversed 19 earlier and we tested it. 93 won't work, that divides by 3. 95 won't work because that divides by 5. 97 will work, doesn't divide by 3, 7 or 9. And will 99 work? Nope, 99 divides by 3. So there we go, we've got our 8 numbers. So maybe that wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, actually. I think I misjudged the question. So we've got 2 numbers, 3, 4 numbers, 5, 6, 7 numbers, and 8 numbers that work up to 100. So we've got 8. Now remember, the easiest way of doing a question like that is to see which bits you can skip over. And by skipping certain groups of 10s, then we saved ourselves a lot of time in that respect. So always look for a bit of a trick to see whether you can do that more quickly. But also remember, if you think a question is going to take you ages and you're still not quite sure how to do it, then you should go back, check some of your answers, answer the easier questions, and then come back to that only if you have time. Okay, and someone's just mentioned 11 again. Remember, 11 didn't work because when you reversed it, you got the same number. It wasn't a different number. So can't use 11. All right, that's the end of our session today. Well done. And thank you all for answering your questions and participating. And I should see you next week. Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
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 Thanks for joining us again. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you're the first to know when new videos come out, and to give this video a like if you found it helpful.